our domestic cat populations are actually pretty similar still to their wild counterparts. And because of it, we can actually see a lot of the same behaviors exhibited in wild cats, such as like lions and tigers, and our domesticated cats. But because of it, our cats aren't actually living in the wild like lions and tigers are, but they're still wanting to exhibit a lot of the behaviors. So you can see how that could maybe create some problems when we're having cats live in our homes instead. But if we understand those underlying behaviors, we can address the resulting behavioral concerns. And looking at those behavioral concerns, we can actually categorize them into 3 main categories. One is going to be problems attributed to the natural underlying drive to be a predator and a hunter and go after prey. 2 is going to be their overall sense of being territorial, protecting their territory from other cats and sending different cues to cats in the environment to tell them, hey, this is my area. And then 3, just problems that are generally related to stress because of how far removed our domestic cats are from their historical environments. But because a lot of these problems are rooted in the same underlying natural drives, we can actually see that we can address multiples of those categories with similar interactions in the environment. So I'm going to go over each category on its own, but then I'm also going to go over some overlying things that you can do in your household to address multiple concerns at once, because there are a lot of overlaps and similarities. But then I'm also going to talk about something that doesn't really fit into these categories as well. It's a specific problem that's unique to the cat in general, and it's not exactly as well understood as maybe some of the other things. So I really want to focus on that specifically on its own. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But first we're going to go over those 3 categories, things that you can do at home, and then we're going to get to that extra unique medical condition that some cats can get. Cats, and I mean all cats, domesticated or wild, are predators, and they really always have been. So if we go all the way back to when we first started interacting with cats, it was because of their predatory nature, so we never selected away from that. Cats started arriving to combat the mice population, the snake population that was occurring because of our agricultural habits, and they were already what we needed. Cats aren't like dogs. Like, we didn't go select them, grab them, mold them to do different tasks for us. They were already what we needed, and we were what they needed. They took care of our rodent population, and we created the rodent population to feed them. So because of it, there was really never this pressure for them to become something other than the natural predator that they are. And we can really see this evident in the fact that our domesticated cats, to this day, are still predators. So a lot of our cats do stay within the household, but some people do have cats that go outdoors, and we still see those cats going after rodents and small mammals, even if they still have a guaranteed food source in the house. They still have this drive to go after and capture prey. Now, what is it about the cat that makes them such a good predator? Well, a lot of it is how their body is just innately developed. They've grown to have this really heightened senses that make them good hunters. Cats also have this really neat thing in the back of their eye that makes them much more sensitive to low light situations. If you think about it, it makes sense, because cats go after like mice and rodents and whatnot that are usually more active at nighttime, so they need to be able to see in conditions that don't have so much light. If you've ever noticed, like, your cat, if you see it in a dark room and it gets like a light flashed across its eye or something, you might see that like bright, shiny, metallic-y green thing in the back of their eye. That's actually something that helps them see in those low light conditions. That green thing is called the tapetum. Now, what happens in the eye is the light goes through, it's picked up by the retina, and you're able to see. But when there's not as much light, sometimes that low light condition is not enough, and the retina needs a second chance to see that light. So what will happen is the light goes into the eye through the retina, reflects back off of the tapetum, and gives that retina a second chance to pick up the light. And that is how we get this increase in vision despite lower light conditions. Now, it doesn't work in no light, like they still have to have some light available to reflect off the tapetum. But their vision isn't the only thing that cats have that make them great hunters. They also have this impressive ability to really decipher exactly pinpoint locations for where certain sounds are coming from. They can actually hear two different sounds that are only separated by 5 degrees and have an accuracy of 75% at distinguishing between those two sounds. That's pretty impressive. But they don't just magically do this. There's a reason they do this. So humans have about 6 muscles that control their ears. Cats have 32. And because of these 32 muscles, they're able to move their ears 180 degrees per ear. And that helps them really pinpoint the location of sounds. So if you pair their heightened sense of sound with their heightened sense of vision, they're essentially the ultimate hunter. But because of how we domesticated them, these hunting desires didn't go away. Rather, they were encouraged as we kept cats around us. So now we're having our cats that are really not that different from wild cats. We're having them in modern housing, and hopefully no one has a huge rodent population inside their house. So unless your cat is going outside and hunting, it probably doesn't actually have that much ability to go after prey in your household. And because of that, we can actually see some behavioral problems developing. One of the more modern ones is going to be the development of high-rise syndrome. This is this phenomenon where cats are falling out of windows in like higher buildings and causing serious breaks and fractures to their legs. It can be very, very traumatic for them. But there's a reason they're doing this. I mean, we've already discussed how great of hunters cats are. They're designed to have good balance. Cats in the wild hunt from trees. They land on all fours. They're notorious for having 9 lives because of their ability to catch themselves. So how do they fall out a window? Well, they don't. They're not just falling, they're jumping because they're hunting. When a cat sits in a window and they look outside to maybe like a busy city setting, they're seeing all these small things flash by. They're seeing all these cars go by. They're seeing people walk by. And to them, it looks like these are small prey that are going around. And if your cat doesn't have anything to go after from a prey standpoint in your house, the most desirable prey for it to go after is all of those moving things that it's seeing through the window. So what does it do? If it can get out the window, it gets out the window and it tries to go after what it considers prey, and it ends up seriously injuring itself. So how do we combat that? We have to give them something more ideal for them to hunt. We need to give them like prey, toys, not actual mice, but like things that they can attack in their house to satisfy that hunting instinct. Now, the same is true for another problem that I see in household cats, and that's going to be overly aggressive play. Sometimes like younger cats with all this pent-up energy, they want to go for the hunt, but they don't have something to hunt. So instead, they start like biting at owners' hands or batting at them. They're going after basically anything that's moving because they need that feeling of having gone after a prey and captured and caught it. Like they've used their sense of sight to see it. They've used that hearing to pinpoint exactly where you are, and then they do that really targeted pounce onto your hand, which is obviously not ideal. So what do? Again, we need to find something that actually mimics that hunting sensation in your house, and usually that's toys. A lot of behavioral issues that we can see in cats in our households can actually be attributed to the fact that they are very territorial creatures. But in order to understand why they're territorial, we have to see how this trait could have been passed along through generations and how it's actually beneficial to the wild cat population. So if you look at cats in the wild, so we're thinking like tigers and lions here, they're very big, very clearly definite predators. They've got long claws, sharp teeth. They can really do a lot of damage to each other if they get into a fight. So it's much more ideal for them to send signals and warning signs and not fight. If they mark their territory and have established boundaries, they can respect each other's areas and have their own resources without having that conflict. And if both cats survive, they then pass on those traits to still have the drive to mark their territory and send those signals. Now, what would happen if that wasn't the case, though? Well, we'd have 2 cats that don't care about signals. They fight. At least one of them probably dies, maybe the other one too. But then those genes can't be passed on because the cat died. But if the cat has the propensity to mark its territory and respect signals, they're more apt to reproduce and create more offspring, which then keeps passing along the traits. And that's kind of how we can see things like that persist in the environment. And even in our domestic cats, there's really been no reason for them to stop having this drive. And you might think, okay, well, my cat's not fighting with lions, it's not fighting with tigers, why would it need to mark its territory in the house? Well, there's still things that a domestic cat can consider a threat to its territory. So maybe you have feral cats outside that are coming up on your porch. Maybe you live in an apartment and a neighbor just moved in with another cat that your cat can smell, or maybe a dog that can hear through the wall. Maybe you're having construction done in your house and there's all these intruders walking in. There's a lot of things that we don't realize can be perceived as a threat to territory that our cats see as very offensive, and they take those measures to protect what they consider as theirs. So what do cats do to mark their territory? Well, one, and the one that we like the most and we want to encourage more than anything else, is going to be the use of the facial pheromone. When cats are comfortable in their environment, they're marking it as theirs, they'll walk through, they'll rub their cheeks on stuff, they're actually releasing a pheromone in there, and they're depositing that pheromone on the surface that they're rubbing their cheeks on and saying, hey, this is a happy environment, this is mine. That is great. That is a safe signal that the cats can pick up. It's not destructive to the surface. It's not a bad odor from our senses. We can't even smell it. So it's a really great way for the cat to have a positive interaction with the environment, but without having detrimental effects on us in the environment. Now, unfortunately, not all of their marking skills or behaviors are so great from the human side of things. The other things that cats can do to encourage the overall pickup of scents and odors is going to be to spray on the wall and deposit their urine. Now, why do cats do this? Well, the sense of smell is actually very important to the cats. Humans only have 5 million odor receptor cells, whereas cats have 200 million. So it's pretty potent to us, but if you think about a cat in the wild, if they're spraying urine on something and they have like 200 million cells to pick up smells as opposed to our 5 million, well, that's going to be a pretty strong signal to any cats that are approaching that boundary line. They're going to be much more apt to pick up that signal. So yes, it's pretty potent for us, and it's definitely potent for cats, but that's what's made it so valuable as a marking type behavior, which can come into play too with the cats coming up onto the porch. If a cat sprays a wall even in the house, the feral cat that's outside should still be able to pick up that scent and know, hey, I can't go here, this territory has been marked. So a lot of their marking behaviors is actually rooted in their sense of smell. Now, I know I talked earlier too about their sense of sight, like their eyesight is pretty well developed. Well, they can use that too to mark their territory. So cats in the wild will like reach up and they'll scratch on maybe like trees or like vertical surfaces to indicate, hey, this is my property. It's that literal visual signal. Well, we see that in our domestic cat populations too. They're maybe scratching on the side of the couch, maybe scratching on the walls. They have that natural drive to scratch things, and it's not necessarily so ideal when they're in the household. So what do we do? Well, if we want to address the nasal sensation of them, their drive to have this territory marking that appeases their sense of smell, well, let's choose the sense of smell one that doesn't bother us. Let's focus on that facial pheromone instead. We can actually use a synthetic version of their facial pheromone to prevent them from then doing urine marking. And that product is called Feline. And I will definitely go over more of that later on because that Feline actually addresses a lot of issues. But keep in mind, we can use the facial pheromone in place of the stimulus for the cat to do urine marking. Now, if the cat is scratching, we don't really have the best alternative for them, but what we can do instead of take away the drive to scratch is we can provide them with a superior place to scratch. So we can use scratching posts and encourage them to scratch on surfaces that we want them to scratch on as opposed to the couch. So in both situations, we're basically offering alternatives, so we're not ignoring the fact that cats have this territorial nature and this drive to scratch and urine spray. We're just creating an alternative solution that still appeases the cat, but is also better from our perspective too. So now that we've established the general predatory nature of the cat as well as the territorial nature of the cat, we can see how we might develop some stress-related problems in the modern household. Again, cats are really not that far removed from their wild counterparts, but the environment that we're having them live in is drastically different. Concerns that a cat would have in the wild are not at all the same as what we have them encounter in society. So, like a cat living outside might be just worried about getting enough rest to go after prey that night, and making sure to still stay alert for other predators, keeping its territory intact, things like that. Whereas the cats in our household, they might be like, well, a plumber just walked in the household today to, redo our bathroom, or a neighbor just moved in next door with a cat. I can't actually see it, but I'm a cat, so I can smell it, but there's no actual interaction. Or even there's all this commotion down the road. There's a dog that walks by my window every single day and I never get to see it. Or there's a squirrel that's running on the tree right by my window and I can't get to it. There's a lot of different factors that our domestic household cats have to overcome that they wouldn't be seeing in the wild. I'm not saying that you shouldn't bring the cat into the household, because I don't believe that to be true at all. I think that we have a great bond with cats in general. It's just we have a lot of challenges to overcome for some of the cats that are more prone to stress. Now, what happens when people get stressed? So we sometimes can do compulsive behaviors like pacing. We might chew on the sides of our nails, pick at things. Just in general, we get compulsive type behaviors because we fixate on what we have control over. If your cat feels like things are changing in its environment that it doesn't have control over and has no outlet for its pent up energy or anxiety or a way to escape that environment, it similarly will likely start doing compulsive type behaviors. And honestly, the one that I see most frequently is going to be over grooming. So I will see fairly often cats that come in and they've got thinner hair coverage on their belly. Sometimes they're chewing at the hair on their legs. In extreme cases, they might even be chewing at the skin too and causing damage areas and scabs. They might not necessarily have control over the fact that there's a neighbor with the cat, but they do have control over their own grooming, and they can fixate on that and distract themselves with that grooming. So what do? We have to keep in mind the developed senses that the cat has. So remember back to our discussion on them being predators. They have heightened sense of hearing. They have a heightened vision. Think of our discussion on Territory. They have this very strong developed sense of smell. Look at the environment through those senses and see what factors might be coming into play that your cat is more sensitive to than you are. If you have a neighbor that just moved in and is making a lot of noises, if you can hear it, your cat can. Maybe play some soothing music, something to distract your cat from what's going on in the environment. If you bring a new cat into the environment and there's some tension between the cats as they're trying to establish their territory and boundaries and develop maybe new friendship, give them their own territories. Set up a separate room for each cat where they can go to escape the other one. Give them that sanctuary and that safe place where they have access to their own resources. Give them their own litter box. Give them their own food, their own water. That way they're not competing for those resources. They have their individual territories. So that way when they interact in other areas of the house, it's hopefully not quite as much tension. Other things you can do, if you're dealing with stress because they just don't want to get along at all when they see each other, use pheromones to help them say, hey, it's a safe environment. There's a lot of things that we can do, but ultimately we're trying to overcome the actual stress that your cat has as a result of that altered environment. Now, the other things that you can do to reduce stress is focus on those natural behaviors that we've already discussed. Encourage play, encourage hunting type activity, really drive home normal cat behaviors so that they have structured interactions, that they're focusing on something else other than focusing on pulling out their own hair. So basically we want to work on distraction and we want to work on reduction of the individual stressors in your cat's environment. So now that we've gone over some of the underlying driving forces of your cat's behavior and some of the potential behavioral issues, we need to come up with a solution to address them. And the good news is that we can address multiple things in similar ways. So there's a lot of overlap between these issues as they all go down to the basic instincts of the cat. So a lot of times what I like to do is I like to first focus on that predatory instinct of the cat. If you're encouraging play and hunting activity, your cat is using its energy to attack a toy or whatever, it's having that hunting instinct fulfilled, it's doing that behavior, it's spending its time and its energy on that appropriate behavior. It's not spending its energy on fixating on other things in the environment. It's not sitting at the door looking at the stray cats. It's not listening to the neighbor through the thin apartment wall. It's focused on appeasing type behaviors. So how do we appeal to that hunting instinct? Well, we want to give them something to catch. So for instance, you can use wand toys that have like little feathers at the end. You can wave it around and the cat's going to catch those feathers. It pounces, it catches those feathers. You can let go of the wand and then the cat's then going to likely chew at the feathers. In its mind, it's just jumped through the air and caught a bird. It has hunted, it has succeeded, it has captured its prey. Especially if you go around with a bit, it's jumping around, it's spending time, it's spending its energy, it's done something productive for the day. It has filled its role as a hunter. Now, other things that you can do too are use other toys, like little mice toys, throw them around, have the cat go catch it. There's toys even that have like things that spin around in a circle and the cat has to chase it and pounce on it. And you want to have this stalking and capture type activity. You want to play into the cat's natural senses. So we talked about the cat being visual, it's got good hearing, it's got sense of smell. Well, one of the ways that we can actually appeal all of those things is if you take a puzzle ball and you fill it with the cat's kibble. If you roll the ball down the hallway, the cat's going to smell its food, it's going to hear the movement, and it's going to have to go chase something. It's going to pounce after that ball, it's going to attack it, it's going to roll it around, and as it's attacking and catching its prey, its food's going to come out of it, so it gets that reward of food. So one that I really like, you're giving your cat exercise, so it's working for its food. You're appealing to the natural instinct to actually go capture something. It's going to feel like it really captured something because it's also getting food as a reward from it, and you're keeping the cat entertained and busy for a duration of time. And the time that is spent doing that, again, it's not fixating on other things in the environment. Your cat isn't over-grooming its belly if it's chasing a puzzle ball down the hallway, because the food that it gets from the ball is much more rewarding than the sensation it has from plucking its hair out. Other things we can do, so do vertical spaces. Cats in the wild like to climb in trees and hunt things there. Mimic that. Get it a cat tree. Let it climb up things and perch up high and look down at its prey below. You want to set up the environment so the cat really has multiple options to go hunt and capture something. The other thing that I commonly use that, again, is a really good way to appease the cat's natural instinct to go after something is the laser pointer. You can wave the laser pointer around, it's chasing the laser, it's like endless basically where you can move that laser to. But the really important thing to remember is the reason why we're using the laser. We aren't using the laser so the cat can chase a laser. No one cares about that. We're using the laser so the cat can do something that appeals to its sense of hunting. The cat doesn't care what a laser is. It needs something to chase. It needs something to capture. If you use a laser and the cat just runs after it, it is expecting to have the sensation of capture. A hunt is nothing without capturing the prey. It is very important that when you use a laser pointer and the cat is chasing after the laser pointer, you must end on something that the cat has captured. It needs to have that sensation of chasing its prey around, and it needs to have the satisfaction of having caught something. So you end on a toy, maybe a mouse toy, you end on a food bowl, something that your cat can contain at the end. Otherwise, the only thing that you're simulating for that cat is an unsuccessful chase. If you're trying to enrich the cat's life and give it that sensation of chasing after prey and capturing something and having a worthwhile, successful hunt, it needs to be successful. Otherwise, you're teaching the cat, oh, I ran around, there's nothing there. Oh my God, where did the laser go? The problem with the lasers is it doesn't actually appeal to any of the cat's senses other than its vision. It's going to be this light that it sees. It doesn't hear where it is. It doesn't smell where it is. It only sees it. So if you just turn the laser off and it didn't capture anything, all of a sudden this prey is still somewhere out there and it has no senses that's telling it where it is. It can cause a lot of problems if you don't end on something for the cat to capture. So great tool, but make sure you remember why we're using it so that way you can use it appropriately to enrich your cat. There's a lot of other things you can do too, though. So the cat trees, yes, I talked about that, climbing up and, being able to look down on its prey. That also functions as a good scratching post a lot of times too. So, if your cat is wanting to have that scratching behavior or marking even its territory through scratching, encourage it to scratch on a scratching post or a cat tree. There's a product called Feline Scratch that you can put on the surface of what you want your cat to scratch at, so that it'll actually go after the scratching post as opposed to choosing your couch. So that can be a really great tool to use. Other things to consider though, so we want to keep your cat away from the surfaces where it's going to see other things. So ideally when we're offering these enrichment options and these attacking things, you don't want your cat to be fixating on an area where it's stressed out. So what I mean by that is if your cat is nervous about other cats coming up onto the porch, for instance, you ideally will have the enrichment stuff in a different part of the house away from that. You can still have the cat able to look out the window and see birds and things, but you don't want it to have the cat tree right by the back door where it's going to be looking out the door all day at the feral cats, because that's going to be very stressful. So just kind of keep in mind that we can appeal to the natural predatory sense of the cat, but we want to make sure that we keep in mind what we're trying to avoid by doing those, and really make sure we're appealing to the cat's natural senses. Now, there's other things that we can do too. So, especially in terms of that territorial issue with other cats. And again, this comes down to appealing to the cat's senses. If there's other feral cats in the environment and your cat is maybe like urine spraying on the doorway, we still want to give your cat the ability to mark its territory through scent, but something that's less offensive than the urine. And the way to do this is to use a feel-away diffuser, specifically the classic feel-away diffuser. That's going to be the one that has the facial pheromone in it. So your cat is going to pick up, oh, there's already facial pheromone there. I don't need to mark this environment. And that's going to be definitely helpful to keep it away from spraying. But the other thing that's really, really nice about having that diffuser there is the feel-away classic facial pheromone also has a calming effect on cats. That facial pheromone tells them that the environment is safe. So if you're dealing with a stressful cat that's maybe plucking out its hair, having that facial pheromone says, hey, this is your safe environment. Who cares about the neighbor over there? This is your space. So by using that pheromone, we can still appeal to the cat's senses and instincts, and we can address a couple of things at once. So it's not just the urine spraying that we're doing and the territorial marking. It's also that soothing anti-stress type effect. So it's very important to address the behavioral concerns that we've talked about in order to keep your cat as well as you happy in a shared environment. But there are also repercussions of leaving stress unchecked in our domestic cats. So one of the things that we can actually see is the stress can manifest as a physiologic response in the cat. They can get a condition that's called feline idiopathic cystitis, and it's when they get a non-infectious cause of inflammation in their bladder. So idiopathic means we don't know exactly what causes it, and cystitis being inflammation of the bladder. So unfortunately, we don't know the full pathology behind it, but we do know that it seems to be correlated to stress. So it looks literally like a urinary tract infection, but in fact, it's actually more common for a cat with urinary tract infection signs, as in peeing outside of the litter box, small frequent volumes, maybe a little bit of blood. It's actually more common for that to be due to feline idiopathic cystitis as opposed to a true urinary tract infection in a cat. And if you have a cat that's already showing a lot of signs of stress and then it starts developing these symptoms as well, you're likely dealing with feline idiopathic cystitis. Now, the other drawback of this condition, so yes, it's uncomfortable for the cat, they're peeing in the house, so it's not ideal from an owner perspective. It's not good for anyone involved, but it's also very challenging from a treatment standpoint because it's really hard to know if we've actually made a difference to the feline idiopathic cystitis. If it's allowed to run its course, what we typically will see is there's a lot of inflammation in the bladder, the cat's urinating those small frequent volumes, there's maybe even a little bit of blood in the urine, and then they'll go for a few days and then all of a sudden it'll be cleared up. They're urinating normal. We don't see any issues. And we think, oh, it's gone away. Must have been an infection, cleared up. Well, except then down the road, it starts back up again. And they keep getting these patterns of urinary issues and then fine, and then urinary issues and then fine. And we know that that happens even if we don't treat them. But from the standpoint of a medical professional, I find it very hard to not do anything to treat my patients. So, I mean, I know that if I do nothing, they will eventually have this time period where they're not showing symptoms, but to me, that's not good enough. I don't want to tolerate those time frames that they're having this discomfort. Like, yes, I know it will go away, at least for a short period of time, but I also know it's going to come back. And I know that when it comes back, those are definite periods of discomfort for the cat. And to me, that's not a good enough solution. So what can we do about it? Well, the primary thing is going to be to alleviate that stress from the get-go. Keep the cat happy and comfortable in the household. Don't let it have those strong stress responses, and then we can avoid those flare-ups of cystitis. So how do we do that? Well, we do everything that we already discussed to reduce the stress in the cat. So yes, you can use those to address those behavioral concerns that we talked about, but you can also use that to prevent this potentially fairly significant medical concern in cats too. Now, what do we do if we haven't prevented it? They have this flare-up, we treat. I don't know for sure that it's going to then prevent future flare-ups, but I do know that I can buy the cat more comfortable in the meantime. So a lot of times I will do anti-inflammatories, check a urine sample, make sure that it isn't one of the few that does have a true infection, because if it does, you're going to need to treat it. But the other thing that you can do is there are some diets now that have actually been formulated to keep the bladder at a healthier environment. They change the pH of the urine, so basically how acidic versus basic it is. And by doing that, they can alter the just general environment of the bladder. It's supposed to keep the overall bladder healthier. And they've also got specific stress diets to reduce the overall stress response in your cat and thus prevent these flare-ups of the feline idiopathic cystitis. So it's definitely something that can be very detrimental to the overall quality of life that your cat has. But there are some things that we can do to treat it, but the most effective way is to actually prevent it. So these tools that we're developing to combat stress in cats and to most appropriately mimic their natural behaviors, it's actually really important even from a preventative standpoint. So I think that's just very important to keep in mind. We're not just keeping your cat happy and enriched in the environment to avoid those other behavioral problems. We're also doing it to prevent medical concerns too. And that's just something that's really unique about the cat, to see a stress manifest as a physiologic response. So in summary, we've established that cats are really not that far removed from their wild counterparts. And because of that, their behaviors are very similar. Cats are natural predators and hunters, which can result in them developing conditions such as high-rise syndrome or aggressive play behaviors. They're also naturally territorial, and that can lead to urine spraying and destructive behavior in the household. Ultimately, if your cat becomes stressed, it can develop over-grooming and even get a physiological response called feline idiopathic cystitis. But the good news is that by understanding the underlying driving forces of your cat's behavior, we can do things in the household such as play and environmental enrichment to keep your cat healthy and happy and avoid some of these behavioral concerns. So I hope that helps you guys. If you are having issues with urinating outside of the box, I do have an episode specifically dedicated to that, as well as another one on litter box troubleshooting, so make sure to check out those videos for further information. If you have any additional questions, I'll be very happy to answer them in the comment section below. So don't be afraid to start a discussion. If you have a question, I'm sure someone else does too. But that's about it today. I'm Dr. Megs, and this is Everyday Vet.